Hey guys, how you doing? So today I want to discuss child sexual abuse through the eyes of family, in particular my sisters. So today I want to introduce you to my two sisters, my two younger sisters. So we've got Natalie, hey Nat, and we've got
Hello.
Jade. Jade's the youngest one. And I want to go through the impact on them, the impact from their eyes on the family, and a bit of a discussion about the predator or the predator's involvement with the entire family. As I said before, 90% of predators are known to the children. So this is quite a tough topic because that means they're either within the family chains, they're within the community, generally a family member. And in our scenario, it was our uncle. So simple question for you guys. So Nat, I'll start with you. I always like to see if you had any knowledge as a kid about what's inappropriate behavior. So did mum and dad talk to you guys? Did they speak to you about, if someone touches you here, did you have that conversation at any point?
Oh, I don't think so. I think maybe in school I would have heard a bit of information about it, but I don't recall mum and dad ever sitting us down and having a conversation. Like, it's a very long time ago to try and recall, but
Okay.
possibly. But
Okay,
I don't
cool.
recall
No,
it.
that's
So I
cool.
guess it wasn't. If I don't recall it, I guess it wasn't much. It didn't have much of an impact on me to remember.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what about you, Jade? So you being the youngest, did you experience that at all?
Sort of like Natalie, very hard to remember, but I do remember our mum and dad always giving us the general gist of like, this is wrong, this is right. If you feel uncomfortable, let us know, stranger danger, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So like pretty much the same, but like Natalie, in a high school or primary school, even like we learned things like that. So it probably came more from there. But mum and dad always gave us like the general gist as well.
Okay.
But
So
just nothing
that's
crazy.
interesting. So I think I got a bit of feedback from one of you. So just we might have to mute. But so that's interesting because I actually vividly remember the conversation I had with mum and dad about that. So we were at the dining table, and I would have been maybe around 5 years old. I think it was about 5. I have this vivid memory. So Nat, you were really young, and Jade, I don't know where you were yet. And mum and dad sat me down and said, look, no one's allowed to touch you here. No one's allowed to do this. So I don't know if it was whether or not because I was the eldest child, it was their first experience. And then it almost became something that they just didn't have the conversation about, which is very important for parents. Please, this is a conversation that needs to be impactful. Like you said, Nat, like if you don't remember it being impactful enough, potentially that conversation wasn't had in enough of a direct influence to your understanding. Now, I don't actually remember it discussed at school, so I don't know if the curriculum changed or whatnot, but you guys are a couple of years behind me, 2 and 4 years behind me, so I don't necessarily remember us having any of those conversations at school, but I do remember them from mum and dad. So it's interesting. So with a different dynamic of environment, although we lived under the same roof, we had a different potential perception of what was going on. Now, in regards to when the abuse in our family started, so my first occurrence would have been at 7. So that Nat puts you at 5, and Jade, that puts you at about 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I haven't really discussed this too much with the public yet, but it will come out in my full story. But the first experience of this was our first time actually being babysat. So we never really got child minded, except for by our grandparents, but by anyone else, any other adults, cousins, aunties, uncles. And it was the first time we were actually in this environment of being minded by someone else. Now, a warning sign, I believe, for parents out there is when someone randomly offers to look after your children. I actually remember our uncle saying, oh, don't worry, you can go to I think it was a birthday party. It was our cousin Stephen, God rest his soul, his 21st, and there was no kids invited. So I remember our uncle actually saying, hey, I'll look after the kids. Now, generally, when you've never been invited or you've never invited an adult to look after your children, it's a very weird offer for someone to just throw it out at you and say, hey, I'll look after your kids in a scenario. So this is, again, the potential of being groomed, being made to feel comfortable enough that this person can just jump into your life, regardless who they are, to look after the kids. So this was the potential situation where it happened. Now, obviously, we hadn't experienced anything to this point. And then at 7 years old, for me, this kind of started. And then it was an ongoing process till I was 12, turning 13. So that would have put you guys around for you, Nat, like young, about to turn teenager, and Jade still in the young age group. Now, your experiences. Now, I always say child sexual abuse is not just the extensive thought of people thinking that it's like complete being raped or complete being molested or all of the quite deep and dark side of it, but the grooming points, the touching, the weird conversations, the inappropriate talk, the inappropriate actions. So from your perspective, guys, did you see a lot of that happen with yourselves, with our other kids? We had heaps of cousins. So was that an experience? So Natalie, I'll start with you. Was that an experience you saw or had for yourself?
So like in conversation with you, like when I've spoken about whatever happened to me as a kid, I feel like it comes back to you in like dribs and drabs. And I think what's interesting about it all is that when you came out about your story, that everyone kind of had a feeling who it was. And I think that
absolutely.
kind of says that if people had a feeling that they knew who it was, that maybe they've had a connection with that person and their own experience with that person, because you don't just straight away go, was it that person? So I feel like with me, obviously I had my experiences with him, and I'm sure probably a couple of people have, and I reckon even some other cousins have probably had experiences too. But I think what kind of resonated with me was when you came out that we all had a feeling who it was, and I think that speaks
even at
volumes.
that age, even at that age.
Yeah. So I feel like, it was definitely an interesting time. So I do feel like, yes, I had experiences, and I feel like other people had experiences too. And I feel like they came out more as you became confident to tell your story, that other people kind of felt confident to tell theirs too.
Yeah, I definitely think you hit the nail on the head when I came and said, I didn't really say much to mum and dad. I just cried my eyes out, and they were doing a guessing game. First thing they actually guessed was, "Are you pregnant?" which was actually funny. But no, and then it was like, "Did someone hurt you?" And it was like a nodding game. And eventually they got to the point, okay, did someone do something? Did someone touch you? And then when they said that, they're like, "Was it a friend?" But they brushed off friend very quickly, like they didn't expect it would have been. Then they said, was it a family member? And the first family member they picked was him. And then it was like when we mentioned it to the family, everyone had this inclination that it was this person. So what does that say? Does it say they were naive to the situation? Did they have any other insight? And later on, which I'll explain in the next episode, actually people did know something about this person. So Jade, what about you? Did you have any, because you were even younger, so any experience or any visual or notes that you could see happening?
Very much so, like off what Natalie said. There was definitely a lot of like, I remember grooming and stuff, like you mentioned before. I specifically actually remember, which I don't know if I even actually told you guys, when the day that you came out, before you even did, I remember mum and dad telling us to go to, like me and Ali to go to our room. Me and Ali was like sitting down, and I literally just got this gut feeling that I knew what had happened. Yeah, and I didn't understand why, but I knew exactly what you were going to tell them. And that's what freaked me out. And it's like, before mum and dad even came to ask us or tell us, I just knew. And I think that stemmed from because like of being younger, and like you said, just random grooming or keeping secrets. And it was all just very like hush hush. But the second that you said something was wrong, it was just like a light bulb in my head. And I was like, oh, okay, this is actually really real. And when it came to grooming, it was like what you said, just random like inappropriate touching or awkward cuddling, things like that. Or I remember things like when he'd be in his room telling us like, and he would be like sleeping naked, oh, come here, come give me a cuddle, or things like that. Just very, like Natalie said, drips and drabs and random little like brief memories that obviously are unpleasant. But exactly like Natalie's mentioned, same thing.
Yeah, so I think that's a big one, is that I remember actually that day when Nancy, my best friend, rocked up to the house, and I knew why she was there, and we didn't drive back then, so she got dropped off. And all of a sudden I just bawled my eyes out and said to mum and dad, like, I need to speak to you. And they sent you to your room. And I remember later on when we came out to speak to you guys, it's like you already knew. It's like I had this bond with you guys that I didn't even have to say anything. And it was just like everyone was tormented, but it was almost like this bubble that just exploded, and we just we all kind of like, okay, something's wrong and let's do something about it. So I think the biggest piece here is that if a victim does speak out and the predator is known to the family, there are other people impacted by this. In regards to, forget about the aftermath of people hating on your family and blah, blah. We're not talking about that. We're actually talking about other victims, other people that have experienced inappropriate behavior, other people that have actually suffered. Now, I understand the torment of the bad memories, and when they trickle back, it took me years for them to all completely come back. But for you guys who never really openly dealt with the situation and kind of sat in the shadows of it, it will take time to heal that. It will take honest conversations. It will take a process. It took me years to deal with that from an extreme scenario, and it's still as extreme for you guys, even though I want you to know that it's not something to just put in the corner. It's something that when you're ready, you'll discuss, you'll be able to work through. And I think that's important for people to know, is that if there is someone in the family who does come out with their sexual abuse trauma, generally they're coming out, they're going to have they might want to get the police involved. They might want to take some quite drastic action moving forward. But there might be people sitting in the shadows going, hey, something did happen to me. This is all important. This obviously adds to the story of how horrible this predator is, but this adds to the well-being of everyone else in the family. So I believe that a lot of our cousins experienced some weird things there. I know I spoke to a couple of the older ones. One of them in particular saying like she remembers the bear hugs where he used to like hug you and push himself into you, and you could feel like what he was doing, but he just and you just laugh it off.
Yeah.
But this behavior was not this one-off behavior. It wasn't a random, like you go, oh, well, that was weird, and it never happened again. It was constant. It was literally, we would see our uncle, 3 to maybe 5 times a week. Like it would nearly be every day, because he would come over. He was like a mentor. He would play sports with us, teach us games. And then we were at our grandparents' houses where he lived. So it was literally his bond, but you see this person every single day. And it would happen all the time. It wasn't this like just randomly happened. I remember vividly moments where, the talk whispering in the ear and he like lick your ear or do really weird, inappropriate things. And I remember at a lot of times sending the cousins out of the room and saying, guys, like leave, like, oh yeah, no, go play with those ones out there. And like kind of trying to take the blow, because I remember vividly what he would do. And in dribs and drabs, I know that might come back to you guys. So I think a big point for people here is, if you were in a family involved with a child being abused by a predator, and the predator in particular was known to the family, it's a conversation that needs to be open. It needs to have an environment that allows other people to speak, other people to openly figure out what the hell may have happened. And I know I was proud of mum and dad that day. They went and asked everyone. I don't know if you remember, but mum and dad rang the family, and the whole family came over they lived in like half an hour away. They were there within 10 minutes. It was ridiculous. And we asked all the kids. Now, obviously kids are just like, oh no, but I think it's not about the instant of asking straight away. I think it's over time, having the ability to just check up on people and see if anything does come to mind. And sometimes it doesn't happen straight away. I didn't remember anything until my 17th birthday. So it was literally that night, boom, everything flooded to me. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I just remembered it.
Yeah. Can I just say as well, so that day when mum and dad would ask, like they first asked me and Natalie, did anything ever happen to you? And I literally just remember saying, I don't know. Like the confusion of like what's inappropriate and what isn't. It was just very, very confusing, I remember.
No, I think that's a really important one to note, because the education behind what is appropriate and what is inappropriate needed to happen. So I think I got that talk, and I don't know if that was because, as the eldest child, they were trying to make sure they like covered all bases. I don't know if they had that talk with you, and this will be a conversation I would love to have with them. But I vividly remember the conversation they had with me. But whether it's the lack of education or lack of understanding, still a kid doesn't understand. We don't have the ability at that age to comprehend that stuff. So even as much as we can educate, as long as when we have the conversation moving forward and you are asked, did something happen? A kid has the ability to take their time to figure it out.
Yeah. You know what I think it is as well? So like mum and dad, I'm pretty sure would have happened with Natalie as well. I do remember them having a conversation about general safety and don't trust people when it comes to this, that, but they never suspect it to be coming from the family. So we never had it to that extent of a talk, that it could come from this person or this person. It was always like a stranger. It was always someone random, like, don't let anyone do this to you. But it never came from, potentially it could be a family member to do this to you. You need to let us know because it's not okay. You get what I mean?
Yeah, no, I 100%. I think that part is super important, that people are educated that anyone can do this. Like it literally could be your mother, your father. And please don't negate, this is for the people out there, don't negate that it can't be a female and it can't be a parent, it can't be a sibling, it can be anyone. And that's the scary thing. It has, a sexual abuse has no face. There is no look of a predator. This person looked like a normal person. This person had a degree. This person was very educated. It could be anyone. It literally could be anyone. So I think that's a really important thing to take note of. Now, in your experience, did you guys, after I came out, did it start trickling back to you at all in the early stages? So for you, Nat, I know more recently, memories and whatnot have come about. But did that, at any point earlier on, did that become a question, or did you feel like you sat in the shadows for a little while I was a mess? I understand that.
I don't know. Like, I think I took it very differently to a lot of people. I know, like, Dad went through the anger phase and everything, and you know, for me, I don't know. I can't describe how I felt at that time. There was so much anger in me that I kind of not just put a wall up, but felt like I had to become the protector. Like, I felt like I had to shield Jade. I don't feel like I could shield that. You though. I don't feel like I could, Rochelle. I felt like you were off. You were in a different way. I was like, I've got to look at how I can help Jade. And when Dad would get angry, I was like, no, Dad, go away. And I would fight with Dad. I'd get really angry. And I think I am still that person. Like, I'm a very heated person, and you get on my bad side, I'm like, I lose it. And I think a lot of it resonates from that, because I don't think I was a very angry person when I was little. Yeah, I was feisty and like had some fight in me, but I don't think I was the kind of person I am now. I think it changed me a lot when you came out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it changed the person I was. I was a bit more vocal, I guess, when it came to how I felt, but not about that. I did shield off, and I didn't come out until very recent, more to you, I guess. I don't know what, I think there was an incident at work and someone brought up a story, and that kind of brought it out in me, and I felt the need to tell that person, and then I told a few other people, and then I spoke to a friend, and when all that came out, I was like, wow, this happens to so many people, because it also happened to that person. And I'm just like, it felt like a weight off your shoulders coming out about it. But then again, like, even right now, I'm not comfortable talking about everything. Like, it kind of makes you feel like, not that it's a bad thing to talk about, but I think it's just, everyone has their time, and
absolutely.
It could take years for you to want to talk about things. But I think for me, for me to talk about it, I felt like it brings back so much anger, and it's a part of me I don't want back. So it's kind of like I'm at peace with it, and I'm happy to tell people my story, but I don't feel like I need to bring it up in conversation all the time. And you know that, because if you and Jade are talking about it, I'll kind of shut it down too sometimes. And I guess that's wrong in a way, because I shouldn't shut you down. You're entitled to speak about it. But I guess it's also, this is my way of dealing with it. Everyone has their own way of dealing with it. Everyone has their own way of feeling comfortable to talk about it. But I think for me, I just became this big shield, big protector to Jade, and not so much like make sure no one does anything to her. It was kind of just like shield her from the anger, from the family, shield her from everything else. And when Jade was like, let's go out shopping, let's go do something, I was like, okay, let's go do it. And sometimes it was just because I'm like, okay, I've got to look after her. I've got to make sure she's okay.
Escape the reality.
Yeah, but then I think by doing that and by protecting somebody else, it's kind of thrown me a little bit under, and kind of I've become a shadow and haven't been able to feel comfortable enough to talk about it, because I felt like my role here is to protect someone. It's not to go and go, but it also happened to me too.
Yeah, I think the biggest note to take from that is if it does happen within a family, there everyone will respond differently. The biggest thing is someone might respond in anger, someone might respond in being really quiet, someone might respond in a lot of sadness, and the environment now is dictating what's happened, and you then respond accordingly. Now, obviously, different personality types, different situations, a different experience you have in that moment will dictate how you feel. And a lot of people negate how they feel because they are in survival mode, and understand that when this happens, you are in survival mode. Most of our childhood would have been survival mode, trying to protect ourselves. I remember in the middle of the trauma, in the middle of the abuse, being in survival mode, pushing you guys away from scenarios that could have been really bad, because after I'd push you away, it would happen to me. So it's a matter of then when we came out, then you went into protection mode and like, well, shit, I'm angry. But there's a bigger issue going on. So you almost sat in the back, but then there was another issue going on trying to look after the younger sister. And I know like Jade, for example, being a lot more quiet and hates confrontation, where you were the person who did all the confrontation. So you can now see the patterns as you grow up. Now, if we look at it, if we're dealing with abuse within a family, everyone has their own role, and everyone also needs to work on their own mental health. It wasn't just a matter of the family just supporting me. And even at that point, I don't think the family could support me to a certain degree. I had to do the work. But when you do come out, generally you're ready to do some form of work. I was quite young. Now, for the other members of the family, it is all well and good trying to help someone, but if you can't help yourself, it becomes worse. So we learned that, we watched that, especially from our dad. Like, dad tried helping us as much as he could, but he was an emotional wreck. And even still to this day, it really still is a big traumatic thing for him. So you can see now with you, someone like you, Nat, where you were the protector for Jade and trying to keep her away from the aftermath of emotion, where it ended up putting your healing on pause. And only till recently, which is still a great opportunity at this age, because again, I get victims coming out really, really late in their life, and there's never a time that's too late, but you're in a prime time to be able to understand yourself and work on yourself. But now it gives you an opportunity to heal. And I think a lot of people get stuck in the emotion that was connected to the human they were back then, and believing it's irrelevant to have now. It may have an intent, it may have been a certain way, but it doesn't mean you still can't be angry. It doesn't mean you can't deal with issues with those emotions, because those emotions are functions. They're not a good or bad thing. They protected you. They were a survival instinct. They are meant to happen. Now, you using them in a normal everyday scenario probably just scares you off a lot, because it brings back the same feeling, but that feeling was relevant. And now it's about dealing with that and learning that. So a big note to people that are trying to move forward in their family's journey of speaking out is to work on yourself. I understand that you've got to take care of the victims and you've got to take care of everyone else, but without you there, no one's looking after the other people. So the best version of you can actually do that. So the more we work on ourselves, the better. Now, I know I was a wrecking ball. I know I was an absolute mess. And I know that even when I started to try and help others in the first few years, it was still quite taxing and tormenting to me. And what I learned is, if you're trying to help someone and it's taking all of your energy and all of your effort, it's still impacting you because you haven't healed. So now when I talk about it, I know the conversation now is so much easier. It's less demanding on my mental health. It's less demanding on my physical health. So I can see from you when you're having this conversation, it still really beats you up, where for me, it's a lot more open, a lot more calm, a lot more connected, because I've dealt with it. So the same thing goes with you, Jade. I know being hidden away and protected on that manner also gave you a big nurturing ability. You listen very well. You weren't as reactive because you hated reaction. So even now in your character, you don't like confrontation. You don't like to put it like face to face with someone. It has to take you to breaking point, where Natalie, you'll just snap your shit and lose your mind. I'm a little bit in the balance in the middle, but I will push the boundaries, where Jade will sit a little bit more quiet and then you internalize it. And that even becomes just as bad.
Yeah.
So we all picked up these traits because of this environment and the way we had to deal with the situation because of our role in the family. Everyone had a different role. Natalie, you were the protector. You were the middle child to look after the younger one while the oldest one was off in a crazy tantrum, losing her shit. And Jade, you were the youngest. You had to be, you know, I have to be quiet. I have to listen. I have to be this good kid. So I think the environment not only dictates what happens, but your role in the family dictates your response. And I think
And it
that's a big one for
changes.
people to know. Yeah, absolutely.
And it changes, because I feel like I was that fiery person when you had moved out and it was me and Jade. It was always, you know, Nat's the crazy one, Nat's the psycho, Nat needs to calm down. And then it was like, and then it shifted. So then when I moved out, I changed heaps because I moved into a very calm environment with just Jason and I, and he's a calm person. So I don't have that fire and that anger when I'm in a house of two. But then I think Jade kind of then took on a bit more of that fire because now she's the only one in the house and she has to deal with things that go on between mum and dad. And I guess it's, your role shifts, it changes a lot. And that's why I think when you find your own way, like I have now, it changes you. It makes you so much better off because, you know, this is me, this is what I want. I'm picking what I want now. I've got a choice, as opposed to I'm stuck in a house where it's not that I felt stuck in a house, because mum and dad are the best people in the world. But I guess you feel like you grow up to a point where you're like, I need this for myself.
I need to change my role.
Yeah, otherwise I will, change my role. Like, stop being this angry person, be this person who's more mature and can see it from a different perspective, because you're not in that household having to deal with it constantly. But then, you see Jade's role shift as well now.
And so then that's a really important thing, because some victims, some family members are going to still be around in their family lives for a very long time. They're not going to be moving out. They might be very young, or they might be grown adults that are still living at home. And I think a big important key here is understand where your role is and edit it accordingly. You may have had responses as a young kid, and those responses were valid and had merit then, but now no longer, and they're outgrown. I always give the scenario of wearing a nappy or a diaper is a good thing, right? When you're a kid. But if you're still wearing one in your 20s, there's a problem. So it had merit. It was a good thing. It's not whether it was good or bad, but it's now irrelevant. So I think as you grow up and the role changes, and it's very hard for parents to see that role change because they are always the parent. But as kids grow up, we need to be open to their communication changing, open to their information or their memories growing back from a traumatic scenario. I know as I got older, I remember things way more specific than ever, like down to the color of buttons on pajamas, like very specific. So over time, when you open up and change your role and change your perspective, you'll become a little bit more in tune to how you respond. But I think people need to be willing to let that evolve and understand that however they responded in that moment is not right or wrong. Can you make it better or worse? Absolutely. But it had merit. It was a protection mechanism. It was a survival mode. So if you break down and cry, whether you get super angry, whether you shut off into a corner, it's okay. And I think that's an important thing for people to know. Now, another topic in regards to all of this that I wanted to discuss was there's always a repercussion. Now, obviously, within our internal family, we were very blessed that we had parents the way we did. Now, some people don't have that. But regardless, family being blood ties is something that's going to be impacted. Now, you'll very quickly learn who true family is. Now, I think, and I speak for myself, but I believe you guys might agree that family does not mean blood, because exactly. Because blood can literally destroy your life. Family, people who you choose that have the same values, that align with you, that support and nurture and help you grow. So we learned that bloodlines were nothing to do with family very quickly. And I think people get stuck on this. They get infatuated with this idea that, but they're my family. That's my mum. That's my dad. That's my grandmother. That's my auntie, my uncle. And they link that to meaning they can't do wrong, or there is a different realm of reprimand for them when they do something wrong. But at the end of the day, every human is equal. And if someone does something outside of your value lines, goodbye, or they should be dealt with as such. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So we learned quickly who family was. Now, Jade, how hard or easy, how was it for you to start seeing family take a side because they did?
Look, being as young as I was when everything happened, it was like I understood everything that was happening around me, but it was very overwhelming at the same time. So I didn't really know how to process it. And then when it came to family turning on family and taking sides and this and that, for me, it was very confusing because at the same time, like, I'm like, okay, I was very close to all these people. I loved all these people, but then they're hurting my sister by not either believing her or turning a blind eye to her story or whatever it was. And it was all very overwhelming for me that I didn't know how to distinguish what was like, which way I should be going and what's okay and what's not okay. And a big part of that for me is like being such a big family as we were, like we were all very close to our cousins and stuff. And then to see particular cousins turn to the predator side, and it was very, very daunting on me. And like, I realized, like you said, blood isn't everything. And it was sad. It was probably more sad for me than anything. You know me, like I'm not a very angry person. So for me, it was very emotionally like weighed heavy on me because I'm like, I'm losing all these people, but I know it's for the better because at the end of the day, I want to be there for my sister because, so yeah, it was a very overwhelming time for me.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think in regards to people pushing people away and a child being confused, anyone being confused, you were a young kid. I was a teenager and I was bloody confused. Honestly, I think our parents were confused. I think everyone's confused in that scenario. And I think it's not wrong at any point to still love those people and in time process your emotion to figure out if you want them in your life or not. But I think the underlying key is having values set. And if you understand your values, and there are never many values. There are lots of, likes and dislikes and all of those, but values are very like hard set. And I think never harm another human, never rape or molest a child, never, those kind of don't kill someone. Like they're your very set values. And if someone crosses those value lines, that's where you've got to understand, do they understand the story? Do they understand what's going on? Have they been manipulated, especially children? I think the hardest thing in this scenario is when you lose the cousins who are all of the same age, because it's then their environment, their parents, their connections, their grandparents pulling them a certain way. In time, as they get older, whether they want to have that conversation with you or not, and maybe rebond and reconnect and learn the story, awesome. I don't think you close the door, but I think the adults have a responsibility here to not pick a part or pick a role or pick a side. And this is the problem: is the facts are the facts. And when you start picking sides and molding the facts and making them false, even though they are the truth, that's where things get ugly. And I think for anyone watching this, if you are in that situation where your family are taking sides, understand the adults here have the biggest power. And if kids and your young cousins are taking a side because their parents said so, it's not on them. Understand, as they get older, yes, they will have understanding, but that's the environment they've been brought up in. And now it's a matter of if they want to build that or change that or learn something about that. Hopefully they will, because the sad thing is now they've been conditioned that this behavior is okay. And generally, when people have been conditioned that this behavior is okay, that it will happen again in front of their eyes, and they will either buckle under the pressure, be a victim to it, or suffer in silence, and they will struggle to speak out. So I think our family did a great job. I'm proud that we did speak out and that we did support each other the way we did, and our family being the chosen people that are still in our bubble. It's a very small bubble. And to those out there watching, our family went from there was over 100 easy on dad's side that we would see all the time, every week, without a doubt, to disowning everyone pretty much, or being disowned, down to an auntie and an uncle and maybe three or four cousins. And that even took time in the process. Over the years, the connections built back because people didn't know where they stood. So I don't think we should judge people on their experience, because like we said, like Natalie said and you said, we all experienced it differently. We all dealt with it differently. So we had to go into our own bubble, and we don't know if they experienced the trauma themselves, if they're still hiding stories, if they knew something and it made them feel uncomfortable. People are dealing with it on their own behalf. So I think if you're going to keep them in your life, it's a choice, because you want their impact, you want them to be a part of that. And I think you can't judge them on their story. The only person really here to be judged is that predator, and people that are condoning that behavior, because that's a big part. It's not a matter of a young cousin just not being your cousin anymore because they're not sure what's going on and their family went one way. But we also saw people condoning the behavior, and that would have been our grandparents. So I don't know if you guys remember any of the stories, but we would have arguments and they'd say, can you just put it under the rug? Specific words, put it under the rug and hide it, because no one needs to know about this. And can we just move on because it's not happening anymore? Like, that's from the horse's mouth. So that they're people that are predators themselves, because then later on we learned there was more predators within the family. There were some really fucked up bloodlines that really destroyed other humans. And because the family did not accept my story from the beginning, the extended family, it destroyed other people's ability to speak up. And I think we saw that too.
Yeah.
Would you guys agree on that?
100%.
Definitely.
So we saw, I think the biggest important factor here for people to know is set an environment that people can freely speak. I don't care if you think it's completely impossible for this shit to happen, because it's possible. I even had the conversation spoken to me. I was guided, like I knew that it was wrong, and it still bloody happened. And people think, oh, that means you were always by yourself. No, it literally happened within, like, we were all hanging around together. We would be kicking a footy around, get tackled to the floor, and you get groped, or you get touched, or you get licked in the ear, and then that layers on later on to more inappropriate behavior, etc. So I think people think it's impossible to happen, but it's fucking not. And I think if the environment was even more open, I think, so say for someone like you, Nat, who really struggled to even speak about it because of so much anger, I think most of our trauma was because of the way the family responded rather than the actual abuse that happened. And that's coming from the person who copped the fucking ugly side of it. But we understand what happened, but it's how people responded that fucks with you.
That's what made me angry. And Jade saw it very differently. I was kind of like, you pick that side, good, pick that side, you're dead to me. I don't give a shit about you anymore. That just really shows your lack of understanding and knowledge. And like you said, it wasn't so much the younger people. Like, over time it did, as those people became my age. And adults. I'm like, well, how do you pick the wrong side? What's going on in your life to possibly pick that? And that's when I kind of just said, yeah, well, good on you. You pick that side. That's fine. That really just shows you're an idiot. But then, like you're saying, it also shows maybe there's something else going on there, and there's a reason they've gone that way, because they've been pulled in that direction. They've been groomed probably all their lives to see it as that being okay. So I guess you've got to be more open-minded. I wasn't open-minded. And I think sometimes I'm still not. I think I'm very just, you pick that side. I know what's right. You want to pick that, fine, go for it.
But that's a choice now. There's you setting clear-cut lines where if one of those cousins came back into our life and said, hey, I am so fucking sorry, like, I realized what happened, I'm not closing that door on that human, because obviously they've figured out something. But also, yes, I believe as we grew up, we started to realize, all right, these people just really don't know where they sit. And they've then ignored another person who's come out, because the environment dictated it so early on. In that first day when I spoke out, I was like, oh my gosh, like, everyone's supportive. And then it was like a world of lies and bullshit. And I was like, what the hell just happened? I had my grandfather crying, smacking his head on the wall, saying, oh, I'm so sorry, this shouldn't have happened. And all of a sudden, these people that were like supporting you and going, oh my gosh, like, what happened? Talk to us, let us know. They just all went south. They all went the other way. And it was like they couldn't handle it. And it's like they realized what the reality of what I was telling them was, that their brother, their son, their uncle, their cousin was this predator, was harming people. Now, you start to look at these people and go, okay, so do you understand what sexual abuse is? Do you understand what this abuse is? And then they do. And then you understand that some of them have actually experienced it later or earlier on in their lives. And this shows behavior and patterns that have been ingrained from environment. Now, if we were set up with a family that, when I came out, was supportive and removed the predator and everyone stayed together, it would have been no problem, because then it would have been a matter of dealing with the trauma of sexual abuse. But I don't think it took me many years to deal with that trauma, because the trauma that I was dealing with was the family being fucked up. And I think that's what you were dealing with, Nat. And I think, Jade, that's what you were dealing with and trying to escape, is that I opened Pandora's box and I felt like I destroyed a family. I was like, what the fuck? Like, my dad's going mental. These people are losing their shit. No one's talking to anyone, everyone. And I'm like, I didn't get a chance to take in the memories. And that's why it took so many years to deal with that. But if you set up someone with an environment where when they do come out, it's nurturing enough that they can deal with the actual trauma of the abuse, it's not going to be this horrible long road of everyone else's problem before the trauma. And I think that's what stems for you, is that you had to be this protector and deal with all these shit humans trying to pull our family down. And then later on, only till recently, when our family knows who they are and knows where we stand in life, you were like, fuck, I need to deal with me. Shit, like, what the hell happened? And I think if people can understand, if you set up your family with an environment to understand that if someone chooses against your values, they are removed, and very easily, without question, are removed. That if someone does come and speak out about something like this, that they have an open floor, there's no judgment, that you don't need to know every in and out. You don't need to know the entire story. I go into a lot of detail with a lot of this stuff to educate people, but when people come out, you just need to know something bad happened and to what degree. Yep, okay, cool. And we can go ahead and process it as necessary. But I think families, if they give people an environment, or they give their children the environment to speak openly, even into their teens, into their grown adult years, when they come out and they speak out and they're in an environment that is so nurturing and open, the healing process will be so much easier. The acceptance of what happened is so much easier because you know it's the reality. You don't want to accept that it's the truth, but you know it can happen. Like at first, people were like, no, this didn't happen. Except for our parents, mom and dad were like, okay, yes, it happened. Like there was not a denial bit in their mind, but then the rest of the family, like, but are you sure? But what happened? And it becomes a big mess. So I think if we can give that advice to people, would be open the communication chain up in your family, but make it an environment that it's safe to do so. And that the people that are in your family are people you've chosen because they can also make those decisions the same way you do. Because if I didn't have those aunties and uncles and those grandparents involved in that capacity where they were destroying our choices and our way of thinking and our way of believing, it would have been a much easier process because we wouldn't have had to deal with the repercussion of the impact towards other families. At the end of the day, when victims of sexual abuse come out, it should be about the sexual abuse, correct?
Yeah.
And everyone else took the spotlight. So then it took longer for not only myself to heal, but for you guys to heal, because you guys had to deal with abusive and rude humans and fights and arguments and manipulation, and then being disowned by our own grandparents. Like it was atrocious. It was literally that. And even to the point when you were trying to be a part of their life, you could feel that it was fake. It was all lies. It was people you didn't want to trust, you didn't want to be around, and you could see that connection. And that's where I remember seeing Nat, you got angrier and angrier because you just realized the bullshit that existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you have a piece of advice? Let's go with like a piece of advice in regards to a family. If there is someone that wants to speak out, what would your advice be to them? Jade, we'll start with you. Do you have a piece of advice?
I think my biggest thing, like especially from my experience and how it made me the way I am, is mindfulness. Be mindful about the way you react when someone comes out about something like this, because it can not only have a big effect on the person coming out, so the victim, but then other people coming out. So say, for example, like Natalie or whoever else, like I know personally with myself, it didn't make me angry, but it shut me down. So I was too scared to say anything, to talk about anything because of the way people were reacting. So you need to create, like you said, a very supportive and comforting environment to allow people to be able to speak. Otherwise, other victims won't. They will just shut down and not want to say anything because they'll see how the other victim was treated and be like, I don't want that for myself. Why am I going to bother? So you need to be mindful about how you actually approach the situation, how you react yourself, because you don't want to internalize it as your own thing. You need to put the focus on the victim and be supportive for them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's a major a part, is that mindfulness, is that if they give us an environment that we can speak comfortably, everyone else can have their own floor to speak, because everyone reacted differently. So I had to push the system. Natalie got angry and you just shut down. So no one's ever going to know the truth of how anyone felt, because it was about their response. Now, I think your reaction to any situation is your own responsibility. And as an adult, as a parent, as someone that has power within a family or a community, it's so important that you have a responsibility to allow whoever is speaking to you speak to you how they need to, and not react because your emotions get the best of you. That's your responsibility.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think a big part of that for me as well came from like seeing, for example, the way dad reacted. Like, obviously he was very supportive, but there was a lot of anger as well for him. And for me being so young, that scared me, which obviously created my barrier with conflict and not being so good with it. So me seeing how he reacted shut me off completely. I was like, nope, don't want to talk about, don't want to say anything, don't want to do this, don't want to do that. Like, it freaked me out. So I think, again, like you said, that's where you need to be mindful and be a bit more aware of how you are reacting, because it can definitely affect other people and them wanting to speak or say anything.
Especially children.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I think that's a big key, is if a child is coming out to you, to a parent, please be mindful and understand that, yes, you're going to be shocked, you're going to be freaking out inside, but the same way is you need to be there for that person, because it's not about you. In that moment, it is not about you. And in your own time, deal with your trauma, because now it is a trauma. It is understanding what the hell happened in your family, and you know, you're going to go through the whole victim blaming yourself, and it's a whole crazy scenario. But that's a whole nother ball game. We've got to look at where the fire is burning right now. Okay.
Yeah.
And the fire is burning right there in that moment. So that's your responsibility, is at that fire. So Nat, what about you? Do you have any bits of advice or insight to, you know, anyone that is a family that's experiencing this at the moment?
I think the most important thing for anybody is just to listen. I think if someone's coming out about their story, no one wants to hear your 2 cents and your opinion about it. Like, that people just need to learn to shut up a bit and just listen to someone's story and take it in. But then I think just from the perspective of a teacher, be educated on these things, get educated. Like, yes, there are gaps in the curriculum and we're not teaching, I don't think, the right things. I think there's a point in schooling where you go, oh yes, this is now a good time to talk about sexual abuse. But I think, like, it needs to happen from when you're little in different ways. Obviously, you don't have to refer to it as sexual abuse in kindergarten children, but I think it needs to be addressed early on, so that eventually the generations of children that are coming out are educated. And when they have children, it's not like, oh, this can't happen, this is not something that's possible. It's, yes, I know, because I've learned about this and this is a real thing. Let's take action. What are we going to do? But I think the most important thing is just to listen, because nobody wants a person, when you're trying to be vulnerable, is to have your 2 cents and to speak out about what you think, because you just want to be like, no, this is what's going on in my life. You just need to be there and comfort me. And if you can't do that, well, then that's not the right person to talk to about it.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That struck a nerve for me, because listening was the one thing I felt like never happened, because it was about the reaction, the response. What are we going to do? It's like, hey, just stop. And especially from the extended family, like mum and dad were there, but it took many, many years. And it was like, you don't really know how to talk about it, because how do you talk about this stuff? So it's not even a matter of being able to communicate it, but it's just about a matter of someone sitting there and just being a support. And I think people think they need to try and fix the situation. When someone's talking to you about a trauma that has happened, it has happened. We're not asking you to fix it. We're not asking you to do anything in that moment besides just listen to me, because now I need to unleash what has this hidden secret, this hidden trauma, and I need to be honest with it. So that's the first step.
Do you know what's another important thing? Don't judge. Don't judge the person that's speaking. Don't be the person that has to add your 2 cents, like I said before, and say, how could you let that happen to yourself?
Yeah.
If you're an adult and something like this happens to yourself, and you go, but you're older, how can you let that happen? That just shows a lack of education in my eyes. Like, you've got to know that grooming is something that, you know, you can't get out of. Like, there's no, yep, okay, he's grooming me at the moment, I better do this. And I guess that comes
It's
from
not
like
known. It's
not that
it comes
simple.
from lack of education. Hopefully one day people can go, oh, these are, the
this is
signs
bad
of this.
behavior.
I need
Yeah.
to remove myself from the situation. But without that education, you can't just judge someone and say,
Yeah.
how can that be, like, how could you have let that happen? And you can't even say that to parents, like, oh, they're terrible parents, how could they have let that happen?
Well,
No
and that's
one
what our
knows.
parents believed.
And I feel like we always, it's funny how we've put the blame on other people and we say, oh yeah, it's their fault, it's their fault. The
What about the
only
predator?
person's fault it is the bloody person who did it, the predator, not anybody else.
Absolutely.
It's just the predator. Like, who cares about everyone else? They're the bad person. Yes, other people make bad choices around them and pick sides and all that, whatever, but they are the bad person.
Yeah,
That's it.
100%. I think, look, it's going to be in every good parent's mind that they failed the child. And to be honest, it is a reality. Yes, as a parent, your role and responsibility is to protect your child. Yes, you failed the child, but it's not something that was out of intent. Intent is always key here. Sometimes it's just going to happen. And the reality is you want to have the tools to deal with it when it does and if it does happen. But
Yes.
it's going to exist for the rest of our fucking lives. It's such a traumatic thing that is so hidden, so taboo to be spoken about, that we have to have these kind of conversations with people and let them know that it actually happens. It's like if you said, oh, car accidents happen, people go, yeah, I know. But if you say child sexual abuse happens, I go, oh, really? It's like, what do you mean, oh, really? So you're already uneducated. You already are setting up an environment that if someone in your family, you got a family of 50 people, and one person in that family goes, oh, really? They are uneducated. So now they're going to set a precedent to when something does happen, or if something does happen, of how the response is. You're going to have someone questioning and not nurturing, not a good environment. You're making it harder for those in the environment. So educate, 100% educate, listen to people. Please listen to the victim and make sure that you set up an environment that is about free speech in regards to whatever you are feeling. There is no judgment to how you feel. How you respond to your sexual abuse is different to how Joe Blow and me and her all experience it. So there is no one way. And I think a big point is when someone is speaking, listen, like actually just listen.
Yeah.
I think that's some great insight, guys. I really appreciate you guys jumping onto this call. Is there anything, look, I wanted to leave this kind of as an open conversation. It's probably the longest podcast episode so far, but is there anything that you think has merit to let the idea of these episodes are to tell people and educate people of the experience that we've had so they have more knowledge, more power? I think the more they understand of the reality of the shit that actually occurs, the more they can go, hey, this happens. It actually happens. It can happen in my family. Like everyone needs to say, it can happen in my family. I've had so many people say, no, it would never happen in my family. And I call them out on it. I said, shut the fuck up, because now you're judging me saying that, oh, something was wrong for it to happen with me. You're blaming someone. You're blaming a victim. I'm like, It can happen in anyone's world. So is there anything else you guys wanted to add, like to wrap this up, or anything else you wanted to discuss? Jade,
Yes,
anything?
just
Or not? Yeah.
did you say Jade? Sorry.
That's all right.
You go, Nat.
You go, Nat.
I was just going to say, just find the strength in yourself to talk to people about it, because you'll be surprised how many people this happens to. Like, it surprised me when I spoke about it. And you know what? When you have a conversation with someone, like I know the person I had a conversation with, I looked at them and I'm like, you could see it in their face and you're just like, this has happened to this person too, or someone in that person's family. So instantly you make a connection that is beyond belief. Like, you're just like, wow, you feel so connected with that person. So talk about it, because you won't be like, it'll surprise you how many people it happens to.
And that's a sad reality that it happens to that many people. It's not this, one-off scenario where it's like, it's very rare. It is so common. It is so common. And remember, 90% of victims and predators are known to each other, 90%. So that stranger danger is a load of bullshit most of the time, because it's someone you know. It's very random for the child being abducted and that happening. That is a big scenario that does happen. But the reality is, it's so in your homes, it's so in your environment, it's so easily accessible. And the reality is anyone can be a predator. There is no face to them. Anyone has the potential to be a predator. If you are human, you have the potential to be a predator. And that's a sad reality, but it's a truth, because everyone does. And the reason why people are not is because of choice, because of their own decision. So you can choose, and these people choose one way. So they're shit humans. They do exist. What about you, Jade?
I just think like a big thing is as well, for victims, like say even adults, like since you've created this podcast, I've had a lot of say clients or just people that I don't even know but have me on social media approach me and talk to me about these things because they all of a sudden feel like they can because you've created that platform. And I think it's very important to allow people to know that if you are a victim of such abuse, that it's okay to come out in your own time. Like there's no timeline, there's no rush. Just because someone else has come out at an earlier stage doesn't mean you have to. You do it when you feel comfortable with the person that you feel is right to speak to. Like, I feel like there's sometimes a bit of pressure on certain people because they're seeing other people speak about it. But at the end of the day, like, if you're not ready, you're not ready. You'll speak about it when you want to, and you just make sure that you have supportive, good people around you that can actually handle it and, you know, actually guide and support you throughout it. But yeah, like Natalie said, same thing.
And you know what?
I think
No abuse is too small. No, you can't compare. Like
No,
I feel
yeah.
like
100%.
probably me and Jade would compare it like to you, Rochelle, and go, well, yeah, you sheltered us and you did this and
Yeah.
we only did this. It's not that bad. Like, who cares what it was? If it was a touch and it was the wrong thing, it's the wrong thing. You speak about it.
Absolutely. I think
Who
people,
cares
that's
about
what
the
people
severity?
do. They look at the severity and from the third person eye, they're like, well, that's worse than that. Raping a child is worse than molesting a child. The child has gone through trauma. Yes, from a physical, biological, like what happened. Yes, okay. But understand that it is all within the same realm, that it's fucking wrong, period.
Yeah.
And each person will deal with it to their own response. I had someone once tell me, oh, but there's worse in the world. I go fuck yourself. Literally, they were my words. I'm like, there's worse in the world. There's always worse in the world. But then that's you negating your responsibility to your own emotion. It's like if the worst thing that you've had in your life is you broke your nail and that's why you started to cry. Well, that's your worst experience. So like your body is responding in a such way. And if the worst thing you've experienced was war and torture, okay, that's what you experienced. It's not to negate someone else's level of whatever they've experienced. And which is a sad thing, is because then people don't want to speak. I know even that with you struggled with that concept for a long while because you're like, oh, I don't know exactly what kind of happened to you. Like I know what happened, but to what degree? And then you're like, okay, because some stuff happened to me, but like, is it the same? Is it worse? No, it's the same shit.
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
it's so natural just to be like, for people to go, oh yeah, but this is, this is worse. Like a lot of people, I know it's a common thing, but people say, oh, think of the poor people out there and everything.
Yeah.
And that's, I agree with that. Yeah, think about that, because it's good to, show empathy towards others, but also
don't overshadow yourself.
You can't think that your problem is anything less than anybody else's. Like even with me coming out about having illnesses and people going, oh, but at least it's not cancer. But it's like, okay, thank God it's not cancer. But this is what I'm dealing with. Don't make it feel like it's nothing. This is me. These are my emotions. Don't push it off or brush it off as
very true.
Insignificant. It's significant to you. It's important to you. It matters to you. That's all that matters. Don't worry about everything else in the world because we can't control that. You can control your own self.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big part, is not negating how you feel, because then mental health issues actually do stem quite strongly from this, is when people start putting people into categories and saying this is worse than that, you should be this, you should be that. It's like, no, you're now pulling of how I should feel in this situation. And you don't get the right to do that. Yeah, you gaslight them and you make them believe that what they're feeling is incorrect and it's irrelevant. And then now we're talking about creating quite drastic trauma. Look, as much as and I don't know if you would agree, Nat, because you went through some stuff, even Jade with you, but as much as the being molested was for that many years was a trauma in itself, the hardest thing for me to deal with was the trauma of what happened with the family. That honestly, till this day, still freaking serves a very big role in my behavior, my action, my hurt. Because when the trauma happened, you kind of understand. You're like, yep, this person's fucked up and like this is wrong and it shouldn't have happened. You have the memories, the nightmares, etc. But then that people have this way of trying to gaslight you, to try and not believe you, to call you out and to make you feel a certain way is a scary thing that creates more trauma. That created more mental health issues than the trauma itself. So I think the aftermath is what's dangerous.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, like you said, me and Natalie, obviously being your sisters and living with you for such a long time, we could see that did more damage to you than anything else as well. Like we saw the dark hole you were in, and that was also very hard for us to see because it was like a spiraling effect because you didn't have that actual support from the get-go from the other people around you. Yes, you did from mum, dad, me, Natalie, but when everyone else is overshadowing, it wasn't enough. When everyone else is overshadowing and saying, you're a liar, no, this didn't happen, like how is this possible? Oh no, just sweep it under the rug. Like it has a big emotional effect on you because it just completely gaslights everything that is your truth pretty much, which is very sad.
I think that was the part that hurt me the most, is the effect that it had on my mum and my dad and you guys, because it was a reaction or a response from the outside world that diminished us, that tried to destroy us, that tried to break us. And that caused most of my mental health issues, that caused most of my triggers, that caused most of my issues with connections with humans, bonding, learning about myself, is because trust issues, because it was the reaction of the people that were still considered within my tribe or my community as important, that started to destroy it. Yes, having your parents there is all well and good, and I get people going, oh well, my parents weren't this, and regardless, your bubble is your bubble, whether your parents, your best friend, whoever your community is. If there's a leak in that community and someone is this weak link that's breaking it, it's going to be a chain reaction, and then you're going to get people that are going to destroy that victim and make it worse for them, because now they're not dealing with the actual trauma, they're not dealing with the abuse, they're actually dealing with what people think, what people are acting like, how they're responding, how they're hurting everyone else. And I think that's a big fucked up issue where we could avoid that in society. Families can avoid that if they just know when their kid speaks up. Like if our family, it took them a very long time to remove the bad links, let's just say that. It really did. And even till this day, there are a couple of rotten eggs that are still kind of exist, I believe. That
a good analogy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So
that's a nice
that, you know, but that have a perception or have a vision, and I feel uncomfortable around it, and I always want to call it out. I always want to say, like, you know what, you're a shit human because you can't actually support the people that need it. And I think we know who we're talking about. But at the end of the day, each to their own and each in their own time. So you just allow them into your life as much as you need to. But the problem is there are other people affected. And when you have a family of a lot of young children and a lot of young in your environment, you need to have the right role models. And if as a parent, you can't remove those role models who are doing wrong or who are not supporting your cause, and you are allowing them to affect you and they're hurting you because you wish there was another way, well, too bad. It's not the other way. And you just need to make that call and change and shift away from it. But that was, I think, one of the hardest things for us. Was it took a very long time for our family to figure that out. Now it's a process. I don't believe it's going to be an easy scenario. I honestly believe that once you've experienced it, you'll be very harsh in your choices. So I know I'm a very harsh person. That I know, same with you, Jade. We just cut people out very easily, and people are like, yeah, but I didn't do it. I was like, yeah, but I don't have the energy for that. So I think if we were nurtured a little bit more in that regard from other people, it wouldn't have been so traumatic. But I think it's a skill to have, because if someone is going to affect my family, I'm going to say, no, enough's enough, done, thank you, move on. And it won't affect me. My reaction won't be I'm upset, I'm hurt, because I'm like, well, no, they crossed the line and I know where that line is. So understand that boundary, understand that line in your families. Well, guys, you are amazing, and I love you both a lot, like a lot. But yeah, if there's anything else you want to say, I really appreciate. This is the second last episode of the series. The next one I'm going to just do about my actual story, because I haven't really delved into it, just done the trauma and bits and pieces. But if there's anything else you'd like to put or add, please go ahead. Anything, Nat?
Don't fuck with people who go through this shit.
Yeah,
they're stronger than everybody else.
Oh, on that note, Jade, anything to add?
Honestly, just be a kind human, be a decent, good person. That's all I can say.
We're so different personalities.
Yeah, I'm not on the aggression side, so.
I love it. Well, thanks for staying tuned, guys. We appreciate it. We hope you've taken out something from this. If you have any questions, please feel free to message us directly through this IGTV or this YouTube channel. Please feel free to reach out. We're here to answer questions, have a conversation. We all have a different perspective. We've all been through a different part of this this journey. So please We appreciate it. And stay tuned for some more stories, more information.